Hi there. My name is Dasha Kelly Hamilton. I'm your host for Poemalogues. I'm also your poet laureate. Yes, yours. I'm the poet laureate for the city of Milwaukee and for the state of Wisconsin. And Poemalogues is a chance for me to gather some familiar faces and have a chance to meet some new folks and fall into an authentic conversation prompted by the search for a poem. Not a perfect poem, not the poemiest of all poems, just an opportunity to think and share stories and land on a little bit of lyricism at the end. Because I'm a poet laureate who already knows that all of you are poets, already knows that you know poems are important. So let's spend more time on the log, the conversation. And today we're having a conversation about legacy. And a guest from head to toe in his chest thumps legacy as a mantra, as a value. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to say, where this conversation is going to take him and take all of us. And I've got a little thought of a poem that I'd like to share at the end about the idea of legacy, the idea of striving for permanence. I don't know. What does legacy mean to you? I can't think of a better person to have this conversation with. I'm so excited to hear what he has to say. But regardless of my ideas, I want you to hear what Mr. J. Sorgi has to say about this idea of legacy. Hello, my friend.
Brent, it's so good to catch up with you and join you for this. It's been too long.
It has been too long. It has been too long. But what I appreciate is it can be a stretch of time and we pick right back up So that's not easy with every brand of companionship. But my friend, I always appreciate our conversations because you always come with a good word.
Thank you. Try.
You try. That's all we ask. We try. So tell me, I am already beaming, right? So I already know we're about to get into a really, really juicy conversation. But before we do that, give us an idea of who you are. Tell the good people your whole life story.
It's a story where you mentioned the word. That's part of it. Milwaukee is a word that's part of it because I've lived the grand majority of my life here. It's a story of storytelling as a vocation, but with love as the most important piece of it. And the growing up in Milwaukee, Marquette University High School, Marquette University, places that not only taught the professional skills, but that taught compassion, a sense of service, a sense of greater social responsibility. And then spending 22 years at WTMJ Radio in Milwaukee, climbing from the overnight producer position all the way to leading our digital and social media at the station for so long, as well as being a news and a sports storyteller, being a long form, deeper content type of storyteller, the stuff of humanity, the stuff of life, while trying to live that myself and trying to leave a good legacy, to chase a legacy of impact on others, which we all have farther beyond than what we ever think. But also learning what's the right legacy to lead and where you're called to impact that the most, beyond just what you do, but the who you share that with in the deepest sense. And that means the legacy of being a good husband, of being the dad, of being who you're called to be, and all those things, and the growth in that. And that is part of the legacy that I'm called to live and to continue the storytelling. I'm finding my next as we speak. Thank you, COVID, for what has happened to so many people in so many different fields. But there's a pathway that I'm finding as we speak, and I've got projects in the works. Dasha, you know some secrets that I'm thankful you're not going to divulge yet, but just stay tuned. So absolutely. So stay tuned for later this year for what that's going to turn into, but it's going to be something special.
Wow. So much for me to pull from just that introduction of your whole life. And two things that stood out in this time that we're in. You described one, climbing from overnight producer, and this conversation of chasing a legacy. I
Mhm.
want to start with climbing as an overnight producer. I would imagine it's like when people meet a doctor, they all of a sudden have a thing that needs to be looked at. People understand that you have a career in TV and radio, the non-glamorous part of the overnight producer. So that is a climb. So I think in any industry, there's that entry level, there's that beginning, there's that hungry beginning point that becomes this journey, that becomes a legacy builder if you do it right. So describe those beginning days. Did you know that you were climbing? Did you know that you were chasing a legacy, or you were just trying to get to work on time? What was that like in those days?
It was definitely attempting to chasing legacy. And a little fun tidbit about that: with most jobs that you're trained for, that you learn, you're not given the keys to the machine in the very, very beginning of your entire career when you're at the lowest rung. You're usually not given the full keys. You have, after a short training period, 50,000 watts of broadcast power completely at your disposal, and you're the news department and the production department in one.
It's like having the access code for an unreliable national leader. Another conversation. But there you are, all young and spry, and you have how many watts of
50,000. That shows you the responsibility of what being present to a community is when you've got that right there in front of you. And it's like learning to drive a Ferrari stick shift on a Formula One driving course, not just learning to drive a car.
Were you prepared for that?
Initially, no, but
Okay.
you get there. You get there. You get a little bit of a, okay, here's how you properly change that stick shift after a few crashes, but they're patient with you. They let you grow. They let you make your mistakes, understand, and become better at it. And pretty soon, it becomes second nature. Then they add passengers to your car, into the car, or shift you into a different car and say you've got a more specified role. But it's the more specified role that's the one that really matters, because that's when people are deeply, deeply listening from 5 a.m. until whatever time in the evening.
Sure.
And when you make the most impact on people.
Did you find, this may be a different, the answer may be different outside of the broadcast world, those
Mhm.
broadcast walls. But you said you came in knowing that you were building legacy. When you got those new positions, were they positions that you saw for yourself, or you saw yourself in, and or were they positions, opportunities where you're like, me? Okay. And then turns out, I mean, I don't know how linear that the work is going into broadcast or
It
not.
was it was very diagonal. It wasn't a straight line. Very diagonal, various different departments, various responsibilities. I didn't think going into my career at WTMJ that I was going to be the lead digital and social media person, as well as a long form sports storyteller and news storyteller for the station, because Twitter was only a thing that a bird did as it was flying when I began. There was no, we weren't into at that station as much of the long form type of NPR type of storytelling that WTMJ suddenly was going into. And they said, we want you to do that and do it with what you do best in sports.
Hmm.
So it there was never a vision, but there was always a vision of understanding, you know what, I can do something that really leads something in other people, because I have this Ferrari of a radio station that I'm occasionally given the keys to, and
Mm.
you can do something to serve people with that type of thing. And I never took that for granted.
Wow. You, uh, you're not at the end of your career. You are at the end of this tenure with this particular station.
And a wonderful place.
In a wonderful place. In a wonderful place. I have wonderful relationships with them myself. So I know that you were well taken care of in terms of being able to explore and expand yourself professionally and those storytelling skills. But this is a pause. And what better time to reflect than when we're pausing, right? So not so much reflection for you, but for the folks who are that may also be reflecting. And when you look back at that hungry young broadcaster with the keys to the radio station Ferrari, to a seasoned storyteller with a social media VIP package behind you as well, what did you learn? Right? So coming out the gate, wanting to chase a legacy, and I'm sure you have legacy at WTMJ. But outside of that place, what advice do you give for someone with that same hunger to chase a legacy? What have you learned at this midpoint?
Definitely, it may feel like an old adage, but it's not what you're doing. It's who you are and what you leave in other people's minds and other people's hearts as you do it. The stories that come back to me of the greatest impact aren't the ones that necessarily came from the biggest news stories that we covered or of the greatest job that I did, say, covering an election or a Green Bay Packers game, or the things that were the definite key points in our society at the time that we happen to have the window to, that we could share and understand how it affected Wisconsin, how it affected Milwaukee. It's how it affected just individual lives. My favorite story, I think, of anything that I did when I was at WTMJ was when there was a women's basketball player named Erin Monfrey, who her mom passed away during her junior year, and her junior year playing on the women's basketball team there. And within a short period of time, her team entered the WNIT tournament, which is one rung below the NCAA tournament. And she played, and her team made the final, playing Michigan State. And she had, as she put it, an angel on her shoulder that night. She had the game of her life. Best performance she had ever had. She was raining down three-pointers at a percentage Steph Curry would be jealous of. So good that night, and led Marquette to victory coming off the bench. And it was such this incredible coming together of, we're using the word legacy, the legacy of a mom coming inside a daughter's heart as she gave her best self for her mom, for herself. And I was given the gift of telling that story for our audience. And then afterward, it was the calls back, the emails coming in from people all over the place who said, I understand. This reached, this impacted. This went farther beyond probably what I could have ever imagined in terms of what it does to people, more than what you can ever think of as you're crafting the story. And there was this innate desire to try and be present to that for others through my story. But whether it's that, or whether it's a song, or whether it's the poetry that you create, Dasha, or whatever anyone else does in presenting a story, it's a form of communication. It continues far beyond what we can individually imagine. And our impact is going to be greater than what we can picture.
Oh, that's really great advice. Whether you have people who are thinking about the digital stories they create, or your point is not about the list of things you do, but who you are when you show up to do those things. Do you have a moment where that kind of snapped into focus for you? And I don't know, that may be one of those dimmer switches of maturity, but I don't, if you had a moment where you kind of, oh, this one time.
It's a dimmer switch, but it
Hmm.
was certainly there. I think that one was a definite wake up for me. There was one story, for example, where we discovered a young Chicago Bears fan in Elkhart, Indiana, who has been battling brain cancer. He still is doing so about maybe 5 or 6 years later after we told the story. He's still here with us, still battling, still doing his best to thrive, even as he battles this disease. His name is Miguel. He was a young teenager at the time. And when he found out about this tumor, the Chicago Bears fan named his tumor Aaron Rodgers because Rodgers was such this tough competitor. So he needed something to help motivate him. And so we documented the story of his journey and of how his teacher is this huge Green Bay Packers fan and their relationship and how even that became this compassionate yet tribalistically fun way of motivating this fight against cancer. And the impact that had after that story was told, we had Packers fans saying, hey, we've got 2 tickets to that Packers Bears game to start the season in Chicago. Miguel's mom, they're yours.
What
I
that
was just given the gift of telling it. That's all that is. And that's the power of the message that we can give.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, it's not even the check mark, it's who you are in that moment and recognizing or kind of shifting into the place where you are able to see not just how you respond and you enjoy the crafting, your skill, but the impact that it can have. There's one thing about the impact that it always has, but when you have those moments, it just pushes out of what's possible with your, especially when you love your work, which in story crafting, I know that it is something that is of and who you are. So do you have, what do you want to do now with stories, or what would be your dream? Is it still digital? Do you want to do more on camera? Is it raising up new storytellers? I know you've got a storyteller at home.
That is an avocation right now.
Okay.
I was corralled in by our 11-year-old son. Daddy, I want to do a YouTube channel so much. I see you on YouTube. I want to do a YouTube channel. A couple of years, I was like, really? So I'm kind of worried about the whole child on the internet type of thing and knowing the business. It's just like, okay, let's protect.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a second. Daddy's a content creator. Daddy's a storyteller. Daddy edits video by trade. We can do this.
We got this.
So we're doing that. And you can see our avocation right now, which is the story of a daddy and son chasing 30 stadiums, all the MLB stadiums, to go see Milwaukee Brewers games and a whole bunch of other different stuff that we're doing because baseball is on hold, at least for having a lot of fans going. But we're doing that. It's called Sorgi Stories. It's on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
That is the passion project that's going on. We certainly invite you to hit the subscribe button with that. But the career vocation, it is leaving it open right now to whatever the job market allows at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But it's desiring to make that level of impact on people positively.
Okay.
That can mean the broadcast world. That can mean working in whether it's some sort of, if you will, ministry of compassion or of justice in some fashion, or helping the world of education and trying to use a storytelling skill for betterment in that particular avenue. So certainly open to what God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, whatever that provides, but with the mindset that the real desire is to be of service with what it is, and to leave impact, to leave legacy.
Were your parents just fortunate and you came out shaped with this heart to be of service and to be kind and good, or did you have an experience that shaped your hands that way? So you've mentioned that a couple times just in this conversation. Where does that source from, this commitment to service?
You can blame the guys down on Wisconsin Avenue, the Jesuits.
Oh, those Jesuits.
Hey, a bunch of priests that, to my understanding, they had a nice beer garden in the basement of their residence. Yeah, they can't be so bad. No, but I was blessed, coming from the challenges of a single parent family, to have so many people surrounding us who were in our lives to say, we're going to make sure this kid gets a chance. And I can't not be thankful, can't not be grateful for that. And there are too many among us in our community, let alone in our country and in our world, who don't have that opportunity. And I want to maybe someday find a way to be that for them. That's a legacy for the future.
Okay.
While trying to find a way in the present if I can. But I was given that gift and offered the opportunity to go to Marquette University High School and then Marquette University. And especially there, a guy named Richard Burke, the late owner of Trek Bicycles,
Okay.
said, you know something, we're going to give this dude a shot. We're going to offer the opportunity that he never has to worry about loans or living expenses while he's at Marquette. But you commit yourself not only to hitting the books hard, but to doing service, to expanding yourself beyond what you've ever experienced, to dive into the life of someone who's homeless or drug addicted or in a domestic violence shelter. You dive into that kind of service, helping those with disabilities, learning what leadership is, learning the social issues that ill our society. That's the Burke Scholars Program that is now literally 2.5 times the size of when I was there at Marquette eons ago.
Whoa.
And it's building leaders. It's building incredible leaders. And he built that.
I was going to say that didn't land on your ears as a, wait, dude, I'm only XYZ years old, but that you responded to it as a calling, as an opportunity, not an obligation, which I feel can take you so far. But a calling and an obligation, definitely one peters out before the other one. So that's definitely a gift, not just this education, but that you have that planted in your spirit. So I don't even know what else could have entered you into this conversation of legacy, but what was the first thing, other than what else came to your mind when you thought about legacy? What got you to this discussion?
Well, besides the fact that you got me in this discussion, all your fault, my friend. But as I thought of the word legacy, I'm going to have to admit that the first name that came to mind was from a documentary that I happened to see and rewatch of the guy whose legacy I covered for the grand majority of 22 years at WTMJ with the things I did on the Green Bay Packers radio network as sort of the broadcast historian of the team. This guy named Vince Lombardi. Yeah. I rewatched a documentary on NFL Films about him. And I mean, when you create documentaries about this guy for radio, I mean, one of our other great projects was doing an entire 4.5, actually 5.5 hour rebroadcast of the Ice Bowl game You know those minus 15 degree temperatures we're all experiencing? Try playing football in that for not just an NFL title, but a historic one.
I don't understand how y'all play in the rain, but go ahead with your
Now, and if you're playing, you're actually moving around. You've got body heat. Think you could be one of the 51,000 fans that were sitting there that day, sitting on metal bleachers, trying to survive?
They loved it.
Oh yeah. I'd be one of those crazies. I wouldn't put my wife or son through it, but I'd be one of those crazies. Well, anyway, the name Lombardi came to my mind. That name comes up every early February with the Lombardi Trophy and the Super Bowl.
Okay.
As well as, all the legacy that he had here in Wisconsin. And so much of his legacy is imbued all over that sport that we happen to love so much here in Wisconsin, and that team called the Green Bay Packers, but it's in so much more. It's in the lives he touched in a society that, on one hand, was searching for like the objective moral truth and upstandingness versus so much of what somebody perceived as the social ills of the time. But yet at the same time, he was this quietly subversive progressive, especially when it came to racism.
Okay.
Take a guess as to how many African American men lived in Green Bay the first full year that he was in Green Bay.
3? No, make it a full family of 4.
Close. 7. He had double that number of African Americans in his locker room by the time he was done, and there was only one Packers player who was black when he began. The second Packers player who was black after he began made the Pro Football Hall of Fame and became the veteran leader of a defense that led that team to a championship. He, along with his Packers, along with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1965, became the first teams in NFL history to have a majority black starting lineup on their defenses. And in the Packers case, 4 of those 6 African Americans also made the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And his progressiveness, his willingness to draft African Americans in the first round when no other team would do it. And his demand that the community actually treat these African Americans as equal human beings, interpersonally and structurally in Green Bay, was a huge reason why they won. But he didn't just do it because he wanted to win. He went through, though no, you can never, ever compare the racism that he went through to what has been the scourge of racism when it comes to the African American experience. But he was turned down for coaching jobs because, as he put it, his last name ended in a vowel, being Italian. He understood what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, I have a responsibility. I have a responsibility to change things in this sport and in this city. And he did. All while being this ultimate moralist and man of integrity. So he was this subversive progressive while being this upstanding man of conservative morals and being like this daily Catholic communicant in preaching the gospel of football.
I would say that describes you fairly closely. A kind, a secret subversive with high integrity and morals. Oh, wow. I didn't, and as you know, I don't follow sports. It's around me and I just block it out. But these type of stories make their way into my consciousness. So, of course, as I gave myself a mani-pedi during the Super Bowl, don't judge me. I'm also following understanding the impact of the tale of the two quarterbacks. And I've seen documentaries understanding how long it took to not just integrate the sport, but just the attitudes that continue to persist. And it's reminding how these structural isms, take a Lombardi because his name ends in an I, to whether or not trans athletes should be able to perform, compete in high school, to whether or not who's the greatest athlete, how are you going to compare a gymnast with I hear those kind of conversations interest me because it's about humans. Exactly. So I appreciate having another layer of knowledge around the Lombardi's legacy, because I just know he was the football coach for all football coaches. So to understand that he was also humanitarian and a citizen, as well as great at what he did professionally, helps me as a non-sports person appreciate why his name is still all over everything and people still hold him up as a model for coaching.
He wanted to become a priest when he was growing up.
Oh.
And then he entered the world of football coaching. So it's like, how do I turn this world that I'm in into a pulpit, if you will, for greater values? That's what his mission became. That's what he tried to make his legacy. And that's what you see. That's what you see.
And how did you start this about being where you are? Where you are planted. Look at you. I told you, yeah. Jay comes with the goods every time. Oh my goodness. Well, let me ask you this, Jay, before we wrap and you share this poem, is there any other good news or a good word that you want to share with folks before we close?
You stole it. Be where you are.
We're in this together. Well, I would love to hear this poem. Tell us what you found.
When I was given the direction to find the poem after thinking of the first thing, we're supposed to search it, Google it. Mm-hmm. Didn't have to. Because right here in my bookshelf. I broke the rule. I didn't Google it.
That's all right. You know what? There are books way before Google, so you get extra bonus points for going to the source.
It is the end of this book that was commissioned by the National Football League the year after Lombardi died in 1970, when he passed away of cancer.
Okay.
A cancer with Miguel, that young Chicago Bears fan. Mm. And this was written by the author, by the poet James Dickey. And it speaks to his suffering and what so many of us at the time were feeling about the dichotomy of Lombardi's legacy and his fight to try and be more than a football coach with what his legacy would be, yet understanding the challenges of the sport and of the relationship of even the value of love compared to the feeling that you sometimes have to play with when you're playing this aggressive sport, this collision sport, as it really is, the feeling of hate, if you will. This is by James Dickey. It's called "Or the Death of Lombardi." I never played for you. You'd have thrown me off the team on my best day. No guts, maybe. Not enough speed. Yet running in my mind as Paul Hornung, I made it here with the others, sprinting down railroad tracks, hurdling bushes and backyard cyclone fences, through city after city, to stand at last around you, exhausted, exalted, pale, as though you'd said, "Nice going," pale as a hospital wall. You are holding us millions together, those who played for you and those who entered the bodies of Bart Starr, Donnie Anderson, Ray Nitschke, Jerry Kramer, through the snowing tube on Sunday afternoon. Warm, playing painlessly in the snows of Green Bay Stadium. Some of us drunk on much advertised beer. Some old. Some in other hospitals. Most middle-aged and at home. Here you summon us, lying under the surgical snows. Coach, look up. We are here. We are held in this room like cancer. The crab has you, and to him and to us you whisper, drive, drive. Jerry Kramer's face floats near, real, pale. We others dream ourselves around you, and far away in the mountains, driving hard through the drifts, Marshal of the Vikings, plunging, burning $20 bills to stay alive, says, still alive. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the lessons of football. Vince, they've told us when the surgeons got themselves together and cut loose 2 feet of your large intestine, crab whirled up, whirled out of the lost gut, and caught you again, higher up. Everyone's helpless, but cancer. Around your bed, the knocked out teeth like hail pebbles rattle down. Miles of adhesive tape from hands and ankles writhe in the room like vines. Gallons of sweat blaze in buckets in the corners. The blue and yellow of bruises make one vast sunset around you. No one understands you. Coach, don't you know that some of us were ruined for life? Everybody can't win. What of almost all of us, Vince? We lost. And our greatest loss was that we could not survive football. Paul Horning has withdrawn from me, and I am middle-aged and gray, like these others. What holds us here? Is it that you are dying by the code you made us what we are by? Yes, Coach, it is true. Love-hate is stronger than either love or hate. Into the weekly inescapable dance of speed, deception, and pain, you led us and brought us here weeping. But as men, or you who created us as George Patton created armies, did you discover the worst in us? Aggression, meanness, deception, delight in giving pain to others. For money? Did you make of us indeed figments? Over-specialized brutal ghosts who could have been real men in a better sense? Have you driven us mad over nothing? Does your death set us free? Too late. We stand here among discarded TV commercials, among beer cans and razor blades and hair tonic bottles, stinking with male deodorants. We stand here among teeth and filthy miles of unwound tapes, Novocaine needles, contracts, champagne mixed with shower water, unraveling elastic bloody face guards, and the crab, in his new high position, works soundlessly. In dying, you give us no choice, Coach. Either we've got to believe there's such a thing as winning. The Sunday spirit screen comes on. The bruised colors brighten, deepen on the wall. The last tooth spits itself free of a linebacker's aging head. Knee cartilage cracks. A boy wraps his face in a red jersey and crams it into a rusty locker to sob. And we're with you. We're with you all the way. You're going forever, Vince.
Wow. I was watching this show, and it was something so subtle as this young boy, he and his dad are both having a Coke, and the dad takes a straw out of his glass right away. And so as they're having this manly, not manly conversation, he's probably your son's age. By the end of the conversation, the little boy takes the straw out of his glass because that's how you drink your Coca-Cola. And I had one of those moments of like, well, just how subtle those moments are of impression. And to hear what we talked about Lombardi as a coach, but having that translate to cancer survivors, um, paralleling what he modeled for them, that was a really rich and layered and touching piece. I'm glad that you chose it. I'm glad that you had the book. Forget Google. Forget Google. Forget Google.
Sorry, Googles.
Wow. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you. You always bring your whole heart to a conversation. And I always learn something. So that and you making me laugh and smile, I will look forward to always having any kind of a log with you, Poemalogue, dialogue, all the logs. So I appreciate conversation with you all the time.
Always, friend. Always.
Thank you. So, and thank you for being a part of this conversation as well. This really was a rich moment. So all of us get up and want to be great tomorrow. I hope all of us get up and want to be at least all right tomorrow. And that's a stretch between here and legacy. And it can be misguided. It can be wrought more by ego than service. And there are all these human journeys that we have to figure out. So legacy is not a path necessarily that you have to chase, as Jay said, but it's definitely a window of where you were and where you might be going. So I have a piece that I found just with that idea of becoming an icon, becoming legacy. And it's by a poet named Clive Culverhouse. And the poem is, your general knowledge is encyclopedic and your pain threshold very low. That and my fashion sense makes us the talk of the town. We just need more people to whisper behind our backs. The poem is called Icons. And you are on track for being a legend in your own mind. And really, that's all that matters. Let the rest of us love on you the way that we will. So thank you so much for being here. And we will see you again next Monday with another Poemalogue.